So back off our holes.
Yep.
Seems a long time ago actually now that we're ever on holes.
Yep.
But the whole world seems to be back.
Yep, everyone's back. New school year.
I was talking to someone this morning saying that he's sick and tired of all these LinkedIn posts that says, here we are, September, back and hit the ground running. We've been hitting the ground running all through the summer.
Exactly.
We're hitting it again.
Kids are back at school.
Kids are back at school. Yeah, how are yours doing?
Well, you got a detention within about 2 hours of being there, so
that must be a record.
in fairness to him, though, I think it was trumped up. Didn't know where he's going. He's slightly dyslexic, which manifests itself as being, lack of organisational capacity.
Yeah.
Got lost, went to the wrong classroom. Didn't even know he had a detention. Came back buzzing about school.
Great first day at school.
Only to be informed that he had a detention that he didn't know about. So.
For not being somewhere that he didn't know he had to be.
Yeah.
Poor lad.
Being 2 minutes late. So anyway, but yeah, it's all good.
Apart from that, you're doing all right.
I'm doing dry September.
Are you?
Yeah, try not to wet myself for a whole month.
You can get pants for that these days. Dry September. So what are we on day 4?
Day 4.
Getting thirsty yet?
No, actually, I'm all right.
Okay, we could have brought some alcohol free in this afternoon.
Yeah.
This is an afternoon recording. Cup of tea here.
Glass of water. So.
Not even having a beer.
So yeah.
Oh, I feel quite.
I did it last year.
In September.
Yeah. So not. Yeah.
Did it make any sizable difference?
I think it did actually. I lost about 10 kilos.
Not surely
not just from drinking, but just from bit of
a broader campaign of calorie reduction.
Probably some of the motivation. We did our company day where we had to we went to Zip World, didn't we?
I wasn't going to mention that. I was not.
We went to Zip World, and you have to get on the scales of shame, and let's just say some of us were heavier than others.
Gravity works more for some people than others.
Velocity is mass times.
I did like it though that when you stood on the scales of shame, the display was turned away so only the operator.
But they do then write it on your arm.
They write it on your arm.
And then they've got this parachute system, haven't they? So it's the parachutes of shame.
So I had I think I had no parachute on the first one, and maybe a tiny one on the second run. Yeah. Some people had bigger parachutes.
Some people had bigger. All parachutes are equal, but some are more equal than others.
But maybe I should have had a bigger parachute because I went faster.
Yeah, I know. I felt. Yeah.
See,
there I was. I've been training for this for ages. Ruined, scuppered.
Going down zip wires. Well, we put a shout out for the zip wire place in Wales that we went to. That was good fun.
I was the fastest on the carts down the hill, though.
You were, yeah. Well, you didn't have.
There we go. Exactly.
Okay, let's drop in now to our next episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast. We're up to episode 85, gradually creeping up on our centenary,
yep.
Which will be somewhere, I suppose, in the new year now. So yeah, episode 85, welcome back and thanks for joining us. It's brought to you by Wellmeadow Limited, and every week we try and come up with something that might be interesting or useful or just sometimes a little bit humorous around the world of growing businesses aimed at business owners and senior managers. So here we are again. Richard, you with us?
Yes, yeah, I'm here.
We're back. Well, just have a look through the last few episodes, which is what we try and do to remind everybody what they might have missed, especially if they've been on holiday and shockingly didn't decide to listen to our podcast by a pool in Spain somewhere or wherever people have been on holiday. Last week's was episode 84 on RevOps.
Revenue operations. So this is all around how do you break down the silos that can exist between marketing, sales, customer service, and how do you use your data and processes to make a more holistic sort of business process that encompasses all of those various areas, but focuses on revenue growth.
Focus on revenue growth, exactly. Systems to join it end to end from quote to cash or lead to cash, whatever. Good, excellent. So that was RevOps, and thanks for the feedback we got from various listeners on that one. Found it varyingly either very interesting or quite confusing. But it is, I suppose, if it's not your world, maybe so. So that was 84. Episode 83 is Inbound Dead. Or did we conclude?
I think we concluded that it might not be dead, but it's maybe
not as living
on the way. It's on the life support.
It's still it's part of it, of course, part of the mix. Yeah. But maybe in the past it's been a bit overhyped and people wanted to believe it because it meant they didn't have to do the hard bit.
I think some of the underlying philosophy of add value to your customers / clients is still very relevant. I think maybe just the pace at which inbound moves is a little bit too slow.
Glacially slow. Yeah. So don't forget the outbound stuff. Do the old-fashioned prospecting, outreach.
Add the value.
Pick up a bloody phone.
Do it quicker.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so that was 83. And then with thanks to Pete for his wizardry on episode 82, which was a week that I think we were both out, he managed to put a compilation together of our 10 best bits.
That's hard work, that.
You managed to find 10.
10, yeah.
Well done. So if you're wondering why we change shirt every 30 seconds in that episode, if you're watching on the video, nice little compilation. So thanks, Pete, for that. Good. So this week, it's your idea, this one.
Yeah.
I think we'll blame you for this. It's sort of topical. It's just the right point, I think. It's not just hype topical, and it's not yet into the details. So we're just giving a little bit of a summary. It's around labour laws. New government want to come in with all the guns blazing and fanfares about supporting workers' rights. And there's been a whole ruckload of stuff in the papers, including this week, trying to show how powerful they're going to be in taking the side of the employee. And now, of course, they're on the back foot and having to quickly scrabble and tell all the employers that, oh, no, I didn't quite mean it like that.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that bad. So they're caught in the middle of being business and growth friendly, but supporting all the employees.
Yes.
So I'm sure listeners will have heard lots of the news stories around it. So we thought, well, let's do a quick run round, unpick them, have a little discussion on them.
And after not being political for the run-up.
We kept quiet all through the election.
Exactly.
I thought we were quite good on that.
We were very good.
Well behaved.
Yeah. But now we can unleash.
Well, I don't know how much unleashing there is to do. But I tell you what, though, putting the notes together for this show, if I were asked how many different areas of legislation are being considered, different subject areas, if you like, which they've announced, I wouldn't have guessed 9 or maybe 10.
Yeah. Which
is what they've come up with. I think everybody's probably aware of the one that gets the sort of badged as the whole thing, which is day one rights. And then other stuff, some of them I hadn't even heard of, I've got to say.
Yeah.
So anyway, interesting to run through all about those. So why don't we start with that first one then? Day one rights.
Employment rights.
What does that even mean?
I'm probably going to have to look at the notes here a little bit because there's a lot to digest, and I think it's one of those this is the one that seems to be grabbing the headlines, as we just said, isn't it? People seem to be concerned about, and what's going to happen if you employ somebody and they turn up on day one and they're not what they say they are.
Even on day 91 or 91. I think everybody is aware, and I've noticed employees talk about this at various companies and ours, and employers know about it as well, that there's a kind of a 2-year thing, isn't there, at the moment, which used to be a 1-year thing up until, I don't know, I should look that up, 10 years ago maybe. It was changed. So you've got 2 years before your employment rights kick in certain matters.
Yeah.
You're still protected from discrimination and other stuff like that, but your main dismissal rights.
Yeah.
And that's what they've proposed bringing to day one.
To day one.
But they haven't really defined what day one means. And I know that sounds really stupid, but...
Is that day one after a probation period? Is it day one of contract? Is it...
Yeah, the day you start. Or even some employment rights begin before you've even started.
Yeah.
If you get discriminated against in the selection process,
so
for example. So, yeah, I thought this was quite interesting. Now, I called our friendly employment lawyer on this one, Richard Llewellyn-Bell from Bell Taylor. Thanks, Richard, for putting a few chips in on this. And on that point about what does day one mean, he clarified that it hasn't been clarified. We don't know.
There we go.
No one knows.
Yeah.
So it could be day one of employment, it could be day one after probation. And he said there's probably 3 ways they could go through this. One might be no qualifying period at all, first day of employment, that's it. Another one might be to align it with a probation period, but then how long would you allow that to be?
Yeah.
Let's say someone said you're on probation for 5 years. That would be unreasonable, wouldn't it? But where's the limit? And the other one might be some sort of hybrid approach, which is it's probation unless there's a certain set of circumstances get met, in which case you're allowed to go earlier. So it could be any of them.
Yeah. I think it probably, one upshot of this might be that probation periods are taken a little bit more seriously or robustly. There's a little bit of laissez-faire maybe with probation periods.
Yeah,
unless something drastic happens.
I think probably bigger companies, and certainly more repetitive work perhaps, have got more structured.
Maybe it's just us.
Maybe it's just us. I think maybe it's just SMEs, not just us. We're typical. Especially if you... I think it's almost impossible in a recruitment or selection process to, with any high degree of certainty, get a good fit. You get a good score to say, yes, this person will fit that job. Clearly, that's a lot easier to do the less complex the tasks or the more Maybe if you've got an exam for something that's very relevant, you've got a qualification that meets it, But if it's a general knowledge worker in an office, it's quite hard until you're in the role. But you're right, we don't, as a result, put together very strict probation period programs designed so that within a short period, whatever that is, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, that you then know, okay, this has now been an extended interview, or 8 weeks in, you've passed the mark or you haven't. And quite often it can take a lot longer. Let's say you're in a sales role or something. You need time to understand your product, get out and work the patch, go and meet some customers. You're not even expected to bring in any orders for 6 months or more. Yeah. So how can your new employer know whether you're any good?
Exactly.
So I think there's so a bit of uncertainty around that. However, Richard's point, Richard from Bell Taylor, he said that actually a lot of employers already use the processes that kick in 2 years earlier than they need to anyway, just because it seemed to be, if it's good for those employees, why not do it for all of them?
Yep.
It's not actually that onerous anyway. If you've got a redundancy situation that crops up soon after you've employed, then that's easy to deal with, certainly on an individual basis. Yep. You just have to do the consultations and go through the processes. If it's a capability thing, similarly, you just go through the capability process.
Yep.
It maybe does take a little bit longer, so there could be some extra costs involved for employers because they're just employing someone for longer than they would have done. Fair enough. Maybe the risk is tribunals if you rush it and don't get it right, but he was sort of playing it down a bit. Having said that, the employers I've spoken to are running scared of it a little bit, and maybe it's just talk, but they're saying they're holding back on recruitment while they wait for detail to be known. Why would we make the problem bigger for ourselves and all this sort of thing? So I don't know really. I don't know if you pick up on any clients of yours talking about it.
Well, I've just come off a call with someone now, and my impression was that everyone's holding back, but they were saying that they're seeing people recruit, but for lower level roles, assistants, that type of thing, not so business development roles apparently.
Right. Okay. Carrying on.
So
it would seem daft to try and hold back on recruitment. If your business needs it, your business needs it.
Yeah.
If you've got to go through a slightly longer process to manage a dismissal, given that hopefully isn't going to happen in many cases.
And
anyway.
probably is this. I think you always got to try and look for the opportunities in these situations, haven't you? Think if it helps you look again at your recruitment processes, your selection processes, all of those sorts of things, no bad thing, right? It's have another look at it, have another.
Get your selection recruitment as robust as you can, acknowledging that it's an imperfect science art, and then put a decent probation process in place as well.
So pros on that, I suppose, is good security for those in employment, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's certainly a level of anxiety caused by employees when they've changed jobs.
Yeah,
knowing that they've got to wait 2 years at the moment before they're secure, which may even stop people leaving their current job, even though they perhaps want to.
Yeah,
just because they want to cling to that security. So it could be a pro from that as well. Just add a little bit of labour mobility.
Cons could increase the cost to the employers slightly. More employment tribunals.
Yeah. Certainly if you're employing people for longer than you would have done. If it's performance, that takes a bit longer. Redundancy doesn't take that long to do. And more senior roles that you may be going to use a settlement agreement anyway, that wouldn't take any longer to do either. Yeah. So it's a kind of a small case of a small percentage, really. So I wouldn't have thought it should be changing people's recruitment plans.
Well, there's nearly 500,000 outstanding tribunal cases at the moment, apparently.
Oh, my goodness. Anyway, so
you probably get away with it. Right. Next.
10 years before you get to the front of the queue. Gosh, okay, so that's number one. We probably spent a bit longer on that one because it's the sort of headline grabbing measure that they've announced. But there's some other ones, and this was in the news this week, more around the option of asking for a 4-day week, compressed working week. But it's generally under the heading of flexible working.
So I thought this was about sort of Pilates at work, aren't I? We sit down a lot.
Sit cross-legged.
We sit down a lot, so I thought, well, maybe it's good to...
When you said earlier you might try and inject some humour into the podcast, I thought you meant something a bit funnier.
Well, no, it's the dad jokes, isn't it?
Dad jokes. I'm no good at it. Right, so day one, flexible working.
Flexible working.
Either sitting cross-legged at your laptop, or the ability to have some work from home, or changing your hours, part-time, lots of things. Now, this actually came in already.
Yes.
Believe it or not, 1st of April this year. Employees now have day one right to request flexible work. So that's not really a new thing anyway, although they're planning on more legislation. So how much more they're going to enshrine in the law. I don't know.
Is that though? Is it the right to request it? So at the moment, there's still a business still has quite a lot of power to reject a request, hasn't it?
They do.
So is this just the right to request it has been brought forward to day one rather than?
Well, that was done on the 1st of April this year.
Whereas I think this is more about
maybe
looking
this tightens
to
up the response.
Yeah, so you've probably got to have a better reason.
Well, that would make sense
to reject it, I think.
Yeah. So at the moment, the employer has to consult and explore reasonable options. Even if they then reject it, they've got to show that they've gone through a professional process, a reasonable process, and adjustments can feasibly make without major disruptions to business operations. Is the phrase. So I suppose it's
defining that, isn't it?
Yeah, each company. So maybe they will change the presumption of it being possible or not. But the 4-day week one, which is what cropped up this week, and we were chatting about that in the office, unless vast majority, if not all companies do it, and we move from a 5-day standard working week, accepting all those people that work in retail, I understand, but for office workers, and if everybody moves to 4 days and it's the same day off, then I can get it. Just like when people used to work 6 days a week, eventually it went to 5, as long as everyone does it. But if some do it and some don't, how do you service those clients that need support? Then you've got your team are all having to take different days off so that you've got universal cover, and then they don't all see each other and all that. So,
nightmare. So I think there are those pros where it says people saying, well, you've got that flexibility around, caregivers or looking after kids, that type of thing. I think the flip of that, someone made an interesting point I read the other day, that if you're having to now work an extra day across 4 days, are you then missing out on getting home on time for bath time, or are you that type of thing? Because you've just got to fit it all in.
Yeah, another 2 hours a day, Monday to Thursday. Yeah, that's a lot.
And I think it is a lot. And I think whether this is being dressed up as a productivity driver as well, isn't it?
In some quarters, yeah. I'm not sure how much of it is there.
No, I don't.
Although I would say that Friday afternoons in lots of places isn't particularly productive. So,
but I think by the time you get to Thursday lunchtime, you're going to be pretty exhausted.
Yeah, maybe you move the Friday lunchtime effect to the Thursday lunchtime.
But
the other thing that Richard made from Bell Taylor again is to point out that if you are found wanting in your process and you haven't properly considered somebody's reasonable request for flexible working, then the penalty for the employee to benefit from is 8 weeks of pay.
Right.
Unless there's some sort of constructive dismissal, which can get more complicated. But maybe employers hadn't quite realised that, you have to just go through a process considering it and working out whether it's possible. And even for those that fall foul of that, it's not business threatening stuff. It's not actually a very strong sanction. So maybe that's part of what Labour will try and tighten up. That was number 2. Gosh,
we're
halfway through the podcast, we're now the top 2. Number 3.
Right to disconnect. Not having to respond to
now, I must admit,
phone calls.
I'm completely confused by this. I know that it's been a big thing in France, a bit in Ireland. I think in Germany, Siemens and others have done it, where they just turn off the mail servers outside of working hours. I get it. But what's to stop employees just not opening up the email app on their phone and not taking a phone call on their work phone if they've got 2 phones or from those numbers? I've not heard of employees complaining that their employer expects them to work out hours, but maybe I'm sheltered, naive, and there's a lot of that going on out there after all.
I throw pebbles at Pete's window 2 a.m.
to get him to answer his.
No, for no reason really, just
nothing to do with work at all.
Absolutely, but I do think. Well, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this one, if I'm honest. I think there is that. It's very important to turn off and disconnect and all that. And I think this year I made a concerted effort over my break to not look at anything. And I think it helped. I think kind of you just get that reset. I think the constant connection all the time is not good for anybody.
Not good. No, I don't want to do it either. It's not us making each other do it though, is it? But it's because we're client led.
And I think as well, it's very then because all of everything's now going through one device for a lot of people as well.
Yeah.
Like I say, it's very hard to then not hit that. Let's just see what's going on with the emails, or just see what's.
Yeah, maybe you should have 2 phones then, or 2 SIM cards in your phone or something.
I don't know. Complicated.
It is complicated. So right, they were putting in some sort of right to disconnect. I must admit, there's not even a button in Microsoft Office, as far as I know, where you can just go and say, "Stop sending me email out of hours." Is there?
There is that. You do get that warning that comes up saying, "Do you want to send this in your normal working hours?"
Yeah, that's a start. in that direction, isn't there? But if, as an organisation, we wanted to turn off the Wellmeadow mail servers, we haven't got our own mail servers like Siemens have. No. We're using Microsoft 365. So I'm not aware. Maybe someone from IT will ring in and tell us that actually, you just go to this page and push that button, and it will stop delivering emails after.
You can put delayed. You could put a delayed response on it as well, can't you?
On the outbound stuff, yeah. It's more thinking about how do you choke off the inbound, because at the moment there's no way of doing it other than just not turning on.
I think maybe as well, just business culturally, we have moved on a bit from the immediate response to an email. People recognise it's quite asynchronous in terms of its communication channel, isn't it?
Well, it was always intended to be asynchronous, but I guess before we had chat, people didn't have an alternative, so they used email also expecting it to be immediate response. So maybe that's a good thing that other stuff like Teams or Slack or whatever, or even WhatsApp, some people use for the instant stuff, and then you keep email for asynchronous.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that one. Redundancy. I was confused. I didn't know this one was coming up. Strengthened redundancy consultation. Now, there's a requirement when you are going to lay off 20 or more people at a particular establishment. You have to go through a more formal degree of consultation and complete an HR1 form and submit that to the government and so on. But it's maybe a technicality, this one, but that always applied to per establishment, per site.
Right.
And so this probably won't really matter too much to SMEs listening to this. But if you're a multi-site organisation, they now say if it's more than 20 across the entire company, rather than just each site.
Well, I wondered what would happen with this with work from home. If that's your that's your office or your, does that count as a site?
Well, if it did before, it won't now, because it's across the whole company, wherever you are.
Exactly.
So it takes that one away. So yeah, fair enough. Arguably greater protection on the pros for this for multi-site businesses, bigger companies. But I say from an SME point of view, I don't think many listeners to this will be bothered about that.
No.
The next one's a bit of a another acronym, a bit of tidying up really. A new body is going to be created.
The FWA.
The FWA.
Fair Work Agency. And they're going to come in and make sure that you're adhering to all of these new laws. Inspection.
Exactly. Maybe that'll employ lots more inspectors.
Well, I worked it out. So there's 5.6 million private businesses in the UK.
Okay.
So let's assume that anyone who's working for the FWA is doing a 4-day week, because
everybody's supposed to be.
They're the type, aren't they? And
the type, aren't they?
And so yeah, and that's probably an increase for them anyway. So let's say they do one visit to a business a year,
right?
Which is not actually a lot, but you're going to need. It's going to create about 31,000. Well, I'm assuming they do one a day because
they're that type of people, aren't they?
Well, yeah. By the time they've kind of gone in,
you couldn't pick a few next door to each other.
No, you wouldn't do that.
Okay, so it was one a day.
So one a day
could be a long inspection.
Could be a long inspection. Well, by the time they've gone through all the policies and looked at everything and spoke, I'm assuming they're going to be pretty thorough.
Confidential
exactly.
Interviews.
You've got to write a report up.
Like Ofsted. That could take several days for several of them.
Exactly. You can't have a one-word summary anymore.
No.
So I think we're probably looking at about 31,000 jobs created for that.
For inspectors.
Yeah. So I reckon all in, we're looking at probably 2 billion of taxpayers' money to make this.
Which would be an NIC
salaries and you've got to have a nice office and all that as well, haven't you? Probably a big
and a logo.
Big chair.
Stationary.
Special work from home chair.
And then a lot of people in the tribunal system to cope with everything that comes out of it.
Exactly. So,
oh my goodness. So good luck to the Fair Work Agency, which will replace existing enforcement functions such as those of HMRC, minimum wage, employment agency standards, inspectorate, and goodness knows what else.
Well, hopefully they can find someone to run it as well, because they seem to have a bit of a problem with that at the moment, don't they?
To run
just run the agency, the FWA.
Oh.
We haven't got a border czar yet, have we? Or whatever it's supposed to be, or an investment czar, or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
No one wants to do the jobs. So,
okay, so that was the FWA. The next one is pay gap reporting, PGR. If we're going to stick to our TLAs.
Yeah.
Now, this already exists for gender pay gap, but in case you're panicking and you haven't done it, it only applies to companies over 250 employees. So, if you haven't got that, don't panic. But for those larger companies, they're already having to report on gender pay gaps. And I guess it hits the newspapers every year when they come out and they talk about, M&S are doing this and Sainsbury's are doing that, and BP are doing the other. But as we found in our experience, where we've dealt with some of the larger firms that have to do this, it really is just a statement of the obvious in some cases.
Yeah.
If you're in a male-dominated profession and there aren't many applicants from females, then what you've got now, certainly in the senior ranks, is the legacy of the last 20 or 30 years of recruitment, when maybe education wasn't as fairly split between the genders. Now that's gradually changing, thank goodness, and we're getting more women engineers, women technical people, and all that sort of thing. But it takes a long time to come through. So anyway, they're going to increase that reporting requirement from, instead of just being gender, but to ethnicity and disability as well.
Yep, and like you say, a lot of that data is probably there anyway, isn't it?
I think all it's going to do is tell us what we already know. Certainly around gender and maybe disability, where whatever we want to do now, we are subject to the practices of the generation older than us.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that educated us, right?
Yeah.
So what can we do about that? But we can change going forward, I suppose. It does put the focus on it. It's obviously a good thing to do, but I can only imagine that the impact of it will take 10 or 20 years. But like they say, best time to plant an oak tree 30 years ago, second best time is today.
The robots will be doing it all in. That's what we should put
Oh, maybe we have that.
Yeah.
Pay gap reporting between humans and robots. Next.
So next is a ban on exploitative 0-hours contracts.
I think the key word there is exploitative.
Yeah, I think we should probably not have exploitative contracts.
You
should never sign an exploitative contract.
I know.
It's not a good deal.
I think if it just said ban on 0-hours contracts, some people would say, hang on a minute, I quite like my 0-hours contract. It allows me to work when I want to and have days off when I want to. But it's the exploitative one, so I get that. So once again, Richard from Beltaylor's friend, our friend, said it probably going to ask employers just to come up with more predictable schedules. So rather than just calling you on the morning to say you're not needed in today, or you are, have just a little bit more forecasting, say, right, next week, this is when we think you're going to be needed. It could still be 0 hours-ish as long as both parties think it's fair, but just not be too exploitative. The devil's in the detail, he says.
Yep. Well, that's...
A couple of other ones. This next one, I think is a good thing, but which only impacts a very small percentage of the workforce, which is to extend the sorts of protections that women on maternity leave currently have to women who are in work, I think. Is it in work with young families? Within 6 months of returning to work after maternity leave.
So we're talking about old-fashioned women here, are we?
Well,
they can have babies.
The ones
those women.
Oh, those women. Don't get started on that. We'll have JK rolling on the comments and everything.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
So people with a womb, these people,
those old.
They are entitled to extra protections within 6 months of returning to work after maternity leave, with the exception of gross misconduct. So okay, that's
got to be a good thing.
Yeah,
I would say that we were the beneficiaries of a very progressive maternity policy. When
you say we, you don't mean me and you.
No, yeah, well, next episode. No, me and Mrs. Buckle.
Yes, you had very generous maternity
provisions
from a very well-regarded blue chip FTSE 100 employer.
Yes, so I think that's
once again not so common in SME land.
No, and I get that there's a it is more complicated for SMEs to deal with because you just don't have the resources that a massive blue chip has. But family's important, babies are important.
What I don't understand is that there's already protections for women during maternity leave and up to 18 months post-birth. So I'm not quite sure what this does. Anyway, devil in the detail again. Can't imagine it'd be a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine many people will object to that. And then the last one, once again, it's probably a larger company thing, isn't it? It's to do with strikes and unions and all that sort of thing. So this did surprise me a bit. Labour are going to repeal the Minimum Service Levels Act from last year, which at least asks for key public services to maintain a minimum level of service in health and transport and
I thought that might be quite useful, actually.
I thought that might be quite handy, yeah.
That might sort of stop the wrath of the general public turning against the...
Yeah, so I'm surprised that they're going to repeal that. I'm not surprised that they're going to row back on some of the requirements for voting for strikes in other sectors. the non-railways and hospitals and that sort of thing. So you have to have a majority of 50% of the members, I think it is, voting for a strike, regardless of however many actually vote. That's
so the Minimum Service Level Strikes Act 2023 is going to be replaced with the Minimum Service Level Strikes Act 1971. That's
we're rolling it back.
That's what we're saying there.
Yeah.
So
once again, I'm hoping that this doesn't impact adversely too many SMEs. I've actually got nothing against unions per se. I used to run factories with multiple unions in. It worked okay. It was obviously a lot more management time taken up in meetings and sometimes even conferences. And for those of you that have used to unions, you know what I mean by a conference, and full-time officials and all that sort of thing. They can be useful, but I think a well-balanced, good management team can do just as well without one.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's maybe changed on it is the recognition of unions as well. And at the moment, not many of our clients have collective bargaining or recognise unions. But if a union wanted to get recognition in a company, there's certain steps it has to go through if you've got more than 21 employees.
Yeah.
So it may well be that Labour changed that. And what a surprise, paymasters being the unions, they've got to throw something in there for them, haven't they?
Yeah.
But I don't think it's enough to make anybody panic if you're currently running an SME. So that they were the main headlines coming out from the Labour stuff. But two other things cropped up when I was talking to our Bell Taylor friend Richard earlier this morning, and he said this first one could have more of an impact than the others anyway, just because it's already in force. And that is not yet in force. There's a proposal to change when statutory sick pay gets paid.
Okay.
At the moment, if somebody self-certifies, or even gets a doctor's note and they have, say, a week off, then you don't get paid statutory sick pay for the first 3 days. So it kicks in on day 4. And they're proposing to change that to day 1 of absence.
Well, quite a few companies probably already pay sick from day 1, don't they?
Pay, if they pay it themselves, they pay salary. But an awful lot don't for especially lower wage and retail and shop floor. And they rely on the fact that there's 3 days where you don't get any pay, not even the government's SSP pay for that first 3 days. And it's the idea of it is it's to discourage, odd days here and there, hangover days, duvet days, type, malicious days off. But anyway, there's a proposal to bring that in from day 1. So that could have an impact. And the other one, which is perhaps a bit of a technicality that he said did come in earlier on the 1st of July this year, was some rules around TUPE.
Right.
You know what TUPE stands for?
I probably did at one point. Transfer of something.
That's it. Transfer of undertakings and the Protection of Employment Act. And that used to be that if you had more than 10 employees, you had to have an election to work out who the employee reps were to be in a consultation body for the TUPE process. And now that's going up to 50. So it just takes out a whole swathe of smallish companies that are transferring people across to another entity. So he said that's handy. He said it's not all bad news. There you go. That's positive.
That's probably,
And of course, as he would, putting a little plug for his own business, he said if you've got good legal advice anyway, none of this will be a problem because you've trained all your managers, which is usually the biggest problem. You've got decent processes in place, and you just get on with doing business.
Exactly. Try and be ethical in your undertakings.
Well, and most companies try to be anyway.
Exactly.
These laws are there to try and weed out the bad employers, but they sort of catch in their crossfire all the rest of us that are trying to do a good thing, but we now have to follow all the same hoops.
So maybe the TWA doesn't need quite so many employees. FWA, whatever they're called.
TWA was an airline.
FWA.
Trans World Airlines. I think we should just have a law coming up with more TLAs so that everything is quite completely confusing.
Yeah, the FWA probably doesn't need 31,000.
Not as many
employees, not as many. Because, we don't all need to be looked at, do we? Most people are doing a pretty good job.
Yeah,
like
I think they'll get away with.
They're there to catch the exceptions.
A few people, not that many. All right, good. So hopefully that's put some employers and managers' minds at ease. I don't know. I think it's easy to get a bit scared by this if you just read the newspapers.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, it was useful just to go through it, I think, and see what it's all about and have it broken down a little bit. And
we'll come back to this, no doubt, as more is announced whenever that gets done. And we'll see what happens. Maybe over conference season that's coming up soon, they might announce more detail or around the budget or who knows what. Good. Okay. Well, thank you very much for wading through a bit of legalese. Thanks for that, Richard. That's another episode down and in the can, episode 85 of the SME Growth Podcast from Well Meadow. As I said at the beginning, if there's anybody else you know that might be interested in the useful or interesting content that we put out every week, please drop them a line, send them a link to the show, or just tell them about it when you're in the pub. And we'll see you next week. In the meantime, good luck with your business.